right? Thanking God once again for the example that he sets for us, not the least of which through Christ. Let's call chapter 8 of the book of Daniel sharing, what was it? Sharing in his endurance, as I think endurance is one of the things that caught my attention about the struggles described in this chapter. That describes two beasts, this time a ram with two horns, both tall, but one taller than the other, and a male goat that will eventually replace the lamb, but taking it in order in the third year of King Belshazzar, I believe it is, in Susa, the citadel, or what seems to be the capital at that time. Daniel is going to get the vision of the ram with the two horns, both tall, but like we said, one taller than the other. That seems to have its way going north and south and west, doing as it pleases, none able to stop it until a male goat is seen charging in from the west with a great horn. I think it's described in the ESV as a conspicuous horn that tramples the ram now being powerless to stop the goat. The goat with the great horn prevails, only to have that great horn replaced by four horns that I think the ESV also describes as conspicuous horns. But out of those four horns, or out of one of those four horns, rises a little horn that will grow exceedingly great to the east and to the south. So great that it will actually have the power to throw down some of the hosts or the stars. I think presumably the stars of heaven, reminding me of the way that the beast or the dragon is actually described in Revelation 12. Going further to say that in addition to that power, it will throw truth to the ground, prompting someone to say, how long? Then the duration, I didn't note the duration, but duration will be given for how long this would be allowed to prosper. Gabriel then being called in to help Daniel understand the vision, saying that this is for the time of the end, twice letting him know, I think, that this is for the end times. Going on, however, to describe the ram as Medo-Persia, so that he doesn't have to guess specifically as to who the ram refers to. He's going to go on to describe the goat as the kingdom of Greece, the great horn being a great king with four horns, or the four horns following him, representing four lesser kings, understanding that that little horn would be the additional king who would be bold but would rise and prosper through a power not his own. Once again, seeming super similar to what we see in the Revelation, described as the relation between the dragon, the seven-headed dragon representing Satan, and the seven-headed beast. And I shouldn't say that represents Satan, but that seven-headed dragon is literally described as Satan in Revelation 12. Either way, that similarity may matter in describing this little horn and functioning under a power not his own, but it might be a stretch, so I don't want to make too much of it. Either way, it is going to say, once again, as we've seen before, that he shall make deceit prosper, but before he makes deceit prosper, it is going to also repeat that whole concept of his power to actually make the saints miserable and actually prevail over the saints, saying that without warning is going to cause certain destruction. Understanding that he is still, much like we saw in the last chapter, going to be subject to consequences. This time, of course, by no human hand. Chapter is going to describe him being broken by no human hand, similar to what we saw in the last chapter, where God set up court to bring judgment against the four beasts. This time, Daniel's response to the dream and the interpretation is that he was overcome and sick. But even as he continued in the king's business, I guess we could call it business as usual, he was still appalled by the dream, and to a certain degree, he seemed confused. The things that caught my attention most in this chapter, quite possibly being twofold. One, the fact that over and over again, at least 3 times, it seems that the saints are subject to injustices that are beyond their own abilities to shake. Understanding that later we're going to see that the decline in the times around them is going to provoke the saints to action. It reminds me that there are times when we don't necessarily need to give up in circumstances where we cannot prevail under our own power, but we do have to have our minds fixed to the limitations of our abilities and that which God has reserved to set right under his power. Understanding that this time, not only do we understand that the saints have to endure under circumstances that are beyond their ability to correct, we learn more about the power that basically is exercising authority over them this time. Understanding that, as we mentioned before, this is a power that this time in the goat, specifically referring to Greece, is going to be a power under the little horn that is going to cause deceit to prosper. That little horn is also going to be one who is great in his own mind. Reminding me that just as God emphasized through Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and now Daniel, the way in which God condemned his own people for the way that they leaned into deceit and treachery, not prolonging their endurance in the land of Israel when they chose to lead in that way, even though he may be specifically attaching these prophecies to kingdoms that will rise after his people, Israel, he is not limiting these condemnations to just those nations. Understanding that, he uses these examples as a guide to us all of the way back to him. This chapter quite possibly showing us the way in which God's people historically have had to endure societies and times that have experienced the rise of deceit. But likewise, reminding us of the way, as we'll see in coming chapters, the way in which his Christ likewise had to endure, quite possibly, similar circumstances during the days of Rome. Reminding us of why, quite possibly this week, we might emphasize the color purple. Once again, a biblical color or a color associated with biblical royalty in these chapters where we see the rise of powers that grow strong, but without the endurance of God's prolonged blessing.